Hello and welcome back to History on the Dark Side. Today's episode, I have the other girl. We started episode 1 with Katie. Now we have Bobbijo. Bobbijo is in high school, but strangely, she's also the baby of the family. But we've only had her for, less than a year. How are you, Bobby?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm glad you decided to come help with the podcast.
Me too.
Say hi to our YouTube friends.
Hi.
It's a new feature, so hopefully they, don't think we're too repulsive. So when I was doing this with Katie, we talked about some of the background leading up to sterilization.
Okay.
Now you picked sterilization. Like, oh, I really want to do that one. What kind of weirdness is that, Bobbijo?
I think it's kind of a fascinating topic because you think about it, and so many women want to become mothers, but these women were forced into sterilization and never got that chance. And personally, I think it's cruel. I think it's against all basic human rights. And I was like, I kind of want to talk about this topic.
Okay, well, it seems like you might have some passionate feelings. So
Oh, yeah.
that's good. All right, well, when we left off on the last one, we had just sort of gotten to the point where is when Hitler first came to power, a lot of this stuff was already going on. The whole idea of finding out who's more acceptable or not had already kind of run its course. And they've kind of got this view to the future. So one thing I need to tell you from the last episode, and Bobbijo hasn't seen or heard that one yet, so she's flying blind. There was this Supreme Court case in America where the Supreme Court justice, in his opinion, agreeing with forced sterilization here. Before it ever happened in Germany, we did it. Good job, America.
That's insane. America's known as the free country and made for like free choices. Why would they do something like that?
Okay, great news. Those sterilizations were free. No, that was the only free thing about it. But the Supreme Court justice who said it was okay said it was okay because, in his view, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough for any nation to have to endure.
That's ridiculous.
So the Nazis kind of flipped it, and they have a more progressive, forward-looking thing. And their goal is, hey, within 3 generations, if we cut out the bad stuff, get the good stuff to come together within 3 generations, our people will be purified, perfected, somehow better suited, and they won't have the drag of these people with different mental or physical handicaps.
Was it only the women who were getting sterilized?
Okay, no.
Okay.
No. We're very progressive in Nazi Germany. We will happily sterilize anyone. So we left off with the law that really got this going. There was local laws already in Germany before the Nazis had power. So this is already going on. And all Hitler really did was make it broader, made it a national program instead of a city or local. I don't know what they call their districts in Germany. But instead of being regional, he just made it nationwide. I'm going to try and look up here what the actual name of that bad boy was. It's got a kind of interesting name. Oh, the Law for the Prevention of Genetically Diseased Offspring. So that sounds good, right? You don't want genetically diseased offspring. That's horrible. Think how hard it is, right? Like, back then, it's not like now. So if you have some kind of disease or mental issue, it's a real drain on the family. Where do you suppose most people ended up who had some kind of physical or mental ailment?
I'm going to assume they either got murdered because our world was kind of crazy back then, or they were sent to like some sort of big facility where they weren't really taken care of, but they were sent there in like this mass, kind of like the camps that they had for all the Jews. That's like kind of what I'm envisioning right now.
Okay, so you're looking ahead.
Yeah.
You're getting ahead of the horse just a little bit here.
Like,
but most people either had like that crazy kid, crazy uncle, crazy grandma, whatever, that was kind of tucked away in the basement or the back room. And that was the person that when friends came over, you just hid away and kind of ignored. Or you sent them to a facility, and how big or small it is depended on the town, but they would be taken care of there. Okay? And long before this law, you got to think we're in the 1920s, 30s. Even in America, it's similar. What do you suppose a psychiatric hospital, like if you've got to live there, you're in an institution, what do you imagine that looks like?
I think a lot of white rooms.
Right?
Like, a lot of
Padded
just
walls,
white.
right?
Yeah. I feel like I'm that kid in the family that gets tucked away.
Oh, this is not true. Full disclaimer, her walls have color and she has a roommate. You met her last episode. Anyway. So there are these facilities though, and they don't have hardly anything we do now.
Oh, yeah.
There's no pharmaceutical program for almost anything yet.
Mhm.
All of that's yet to be figured out and invented.
Mhm.
And so you're there and you're cared for in terms of you get fed and you might get bathed if you're not capable of doing that. There's no real concept of doing something to help a person with their condition. These aren't places you go to heal. These are just places you go to not be at home.
That's ridiculous.
And it could be that you're dangerous, you know, if you had a schizophrenic person, or, I mean, some of that could be really dangerous to other people.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. A lot of it, though, is just being too much to deal with. And it wasn't, you know, uncommon. Like in today's world, if somebody was really, for lack of a better term, kind of crazy,
Or
right?
like dangerous to society.
But if they're not dangerous to society and they're just kind of out there, it would be surprising to hear of a family sending them off to an institution.
Yeah.
That's so foreign to how we do things today.
Yeah.
Back then, in America, as well as there in Germany, pretty similar. That was kind of common. Families didn't really know what to do with that. So if you had the means and you had the time, put them in the basement, hide them when the company comes.
Hide them when the company comes.
And if you don't really have those kind of resources, they went off to the institution. These weren't places you really visited much.
That just sounds awful. Because when I think about it, I love having connection with my friends and family. It like brings joy into my life. So sending like a family member off to this institution and never seeing them, that would just be torture.
Right, and I imagine it's not great for them either, right?
Oh yeah,
Like,
no. They're like, what? My family just dumped me here and like never
Right.
sees me. That's kind of ridiculous to me. But
so when this law passes, I want to read you, so I don't forget any, the conditions that qualify you to be sterilized. To save, you know, you from having to have this messed up kid, to save Germany from having to support this messed up person, to save the future. And those are two things that are happening in parallel. You know, you're selling it like, hey, we're going to save you from all this extra expense and turmoil, and you won't have to have this bad kid, because apparently it's bad. But we're also going to save Germany. So here's your conditions. We'll just go through them slow here. Chronic alcoholism.
oh wow.
This humors me a little bit because, I mean, one of the things, and this is a stereotype, I get it, but one of the things I think of when I think of Germany is, you know, Oktoberfest and the big stein of beer.
Yeah.
So drinking's not unusual there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the roaring 20s in America, that whole era of prohibition where
Yeah.
we've legally outlawed alcohol, and then we're pounding it in secret, and we've just kind of gotten rid of that by the time, you know, just before the war starts.
Yeah.
So I don't know what goes on in Germany along those lines, but if you're chronically alcoholic, you could be sterilized.
Okay, what is chronically alcohol?
There you go. There you go. That's the rub. And there's no feeling of treating alcoholism like a disease, really.
Mhm.
This is a social disorder
Yeah.
as far as this stuff goes. All right, what else we got here? Severe physical deformity.
That one I can see a little bit more because, you know, when you're like obviously it's still horrible and like kind of ridiculous, but when you're physically deformed, you don't want to pass it on to like your children because it's usually genetic.
Could be, right?
Yeah, because unless you like had an accident, like it messed up
Right.
or something.
And I guess one of the issues there is they're not sure what's genetic and what's not. We haven't cracked the DNA code yet. Even now, if somebody's pregnant and they do all the stuff they do now, what do you get? You get an ultrasound, you get some blood work.
Yeah.
They can do all kinds of stuff.
They can test your baby for Down syndrome and stuff like that.
Right. But there's still times where they're like, ooh, your kid has, if you carry this through to term, right? This kid has a 70% chance of having this disease or a 50% chance. They still can't always say for sure.
Yeah. It's like, are you willing to take that chance and continue full term of like with a chance of your baby having something,
right?
Or just terminate it now?
And 90 years ago, that technology is going to be much lesser than it is now. What else we got here? Genetic deafness.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, back then you can tell that people weren't really sure how to work around that. Now we have like sign language and stuff, but I don't think we had it that much back then.
Well, I mean, and I think of it this way. You're a woman, if you had a child who was deaf, would you have even a thought of, oh my gosh, it's over, I should never have this baby?
No, not for 1 second, because that's awful to me.
But it's pretty manageable, right?
Yeah, it's something that you can manage.
I've got a deaf nephew, and, he can talk some, it's getting worse. I don't know that his thing's genetic or not, but I don't think it is, because I know his parents. Yeah. But you just work around it,
Yeah.
You talk louder, you learn a little sign language. He's learned to read lips. It's crazy to me that that's something that was unable to overcome and fit in society. If you can't hear, it's over for you. It's just done.
It's just like, if you can't see, you're done. But now there's like so many, like I had a blind friend back when I lived in Utah. She was awesome, loved her. She was so sweet. And thinking about like if she had been born in the early 1900s, they probably would have killed her.
I guess it depends where you live, right?
Yeah. Obviously, probably not in the U.S., but in some countries. And
you got ahead of the curve here because genetic blindness was the next one.
Yeah.
So we got blindness, deafness, Huntington's disease, a fatal form of dementia. So Huntington's chorea. I don't even know exactly what that is. A form of dementia, but I mean, can you think about like now dementia manifests itself all the time in old people, right? Yeah. You got Alzheimer's.
You hear it all the time, yeah.
I mean, maybe they're trying to figure out what causes that. If that's a genetic thing, if that's something from the environment or from just people living longer or older or whatever. I don't think they know.
I think it's a bit of everything now. I think we figured out that it's a bit of genetics, environment, just getting older, like.
But it makes me think, back then, if people are, quote, crazy, what do? Well, they get to this point and you just have to put them away.
Yeah.
With old people who suffer from Alzheimer's, we're kind of in a similar boat, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what do you do with them? If you have enough people and enough means to put the hospital bed in your living room and take care of them there at home, you do. And if not, I guess we still kind of send them somewhere to get help. I think that helps a lot better nowadays than it was 80 years ago. But you still hear stories. It's not always.
Yeah. Like, we still have nursing homes for that and
yeah.
stuff like that. But I think the nursing homes now are a lot better about taking care of their patients and like living by like human rights more than we were, especially in Germany. Like, you hear about Nazi Germany all the time. Like, they just sound horrible. But they probably have some good. But with this, I don't, personally, I don't think they were that nice about it, because you saw what happened with everything else to do with Germany.
And just, to be clear, it's the Nazi Germany and the German populace at large. They're different.
They are.
There's some common threads that help them come together in the bad way they did, but they are in fact different things.
Yeah.
Manic depressive disorder. Schizophrenia, which I guess could be dangerous, so that's a little more understandable. Genetic epilepsy. So, if you're an epileptic, you suffer seizures. if that's genetic. So apparently they have enough science at the time to determine that.
Yeah.
Which I guess is, hey, did your mom or dad have these too? There you go, right? Doesn't take a rocket scientist there.
Yeah.
But if you have a seizure now, nobody would think, oh my gosh, this person, they don't even deserve to live. That one's weird to me too.
Yeah.
And here's the catch-all. You're gonna love this one. Feeble-mindedness.
What is that?
What's it sound like?
Maybe just like small-minded or like learning disabilities to do with the brain.
There you go.
That's sad. I have a little brother with learning disabilities.
Well, I think if we took what we use in today's lexicon, ADHD or
ADD,
ADD, all of these things, or even low IQ, all of those things might fit under this big broad envelope of feeble-mindedness.
That's ridiculous.
It's a little bit scary.
Well, because I have like 4 siblings with ADHD.
Right.
That's kind of terrifying.
And what's interesting to me, I know I've got relatives and they have ADHD, and the ones who have grown, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think of a couple of my nephews in particular. Man, they were all over the board as kids.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, hello, bouncing off the walls.
Oh, yeah, for
And
real.
as they got older, that really
It, like,
sort of naturally calmed itself down.
Yeah, it just like calms.
By the time they're 18 or 19, they might still have moments like that, but it's not this frantic look all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on in the inside, but it doesn't manifest the same way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like you sort of grow out of that, at least in some cases.
Yeah, some people can have it till they're 80 and it's the same.
So I just wonder, what's the determining factor?
Like, if
How do you decide if this is one, well, we need to sterilize this one, or maybe this guy will turn out just fine. He's just going to be a rambunctious kid.
well, and you can have small amounts of it as a kid and it shows a little bit, but it's like manageable.
Right.
So I wonder if they determined if those people ought to be sterilized too, because it can still pass on.
So that's, I guess, the next thing to talk about is how do we determine who qualifies for this,
Yeah.
and therefore qualifies for sterilization. Like, yay, you won the prize, sterilization, yay. So they, in a very Nazi manner, okay? First of all, most of your medical people there's more people in the medical field that are Nazis as a ratio than there is in the general population. That field really had a draw. I think some of that reason is because of this study of eugenics and, oh, I forgot the stupid light does that. You just go.
Yeah.
So, because there's this eugenics determining people by, measuring different parts of their body, categorizing them, and that's science, I think there's a crossover there that draws in the medical part. And the other big thing that I talked about in Katie's episode was that this idea of the future Germany as an entire living organism, you have the ability to do no harm and to do the best for that larger body instead of you as an individual. So, I might perform a sterilization on Bobbijo, and that's not the best news in the world for you, right?
Oh, no.
But if I can go, but down the road, there's going to be this many less people that are a harm or a drag to German society, then, well, maybe I'm doing a greater good for the future.
Yeah.
Now, that's not how I think, but I think that's how a lot of people in that field could wrap their head around it and feel okay about it.
Yeah.
Make that moral thing. So they came up with a system to determine how you were going to, how this was going to go down. And it's funny, like everything in Nazi Germany that's a bureaucracy, it seems like there's always 3 people involved. There's 3 people. And they would get the case files for people who've been recommended. Now, who recommends them? I don't know. That could be the local doctor. That could be a local political person. That could maybe just be a family or a member in the community who shows concern. So the door to get your name on the list is pretty wide open.
Yikes.
Yeah, don't make your neighbor mad or you're feeble-minded, and away we go.
Yeah, like, I could just see it, like, your neighbor comes over and is like, hey, can I have a cup of sugar or something like that? And you're like, oh, sorry, I'm out of sugar. And they're like,
Yeah. You definitely want to share the sugar.
Yeah. Like that's kind of what's going on in my head right now. Mostly because I just like to joke about serious topics, but.
Well, if it only worked that way, then everybody who didn't get killed or jacked up would be really nice to each other.
Yeah,
right? But
right.
that's not how it works. So they have this panel, and in different times for different things, who's on the panel is different, but there's almost always 3 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, and so in the one case, you might have 3 doctors, and it could be 2 physical doctors and a psychiatrist. That was pretty typical. They wanted to get all of that input. Or it could be a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, and someone from the Institute for Racial Hygiene. So this racial hygiene is kind of where we get this term ethnic cleansing later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not killing everybody who's not you yet, but it's how can we make who is us better or the best collectively. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's what they're trying to do. We're not worrying about the rest of the world yet. We're just focusing on our own German selves. And so here's this bunch of names, and maybe it has some information about why they're on the list and should they qualify. And a doctor just puts a check mark if they're already, if they think, hey, it's like simple. Plus, then yeah, they should get it. Minus, no, there's something else going on. We don't need to do this to them. Okay?
Yeah.
If you wanted this to be as fair as possible, you would probably, like when we vote here in America, mm-hmm. How do we vote?
Oh, we just go in somewhere and just fill out a ballot. Or you can do it online now because COVID, but.
Okay. Do you see how your neighbor votes?
No.
Why is that important?
Maybe because they don't want like peer influence. Mm-hmm. So you think about like peer pressure. If someone's like, oh yeah, I voted for, our last election, Trump and Biden. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, I voted for Biden. So you're like, oh, my friend voted for Biden, so maybe mm-hmm. I should.
Sure.
Even though you think Trump should be voted for, like peer pressure.
So if we're going to have a panel of doctors decide the fate of an individual, as far as are they going to ever have children or not, which is a pretty big deal,
yeah.
Right? What do you think that 3-person panel should look like, or how should they work? How should they come up with that determination?
Well, I think it should be like a fair game. People who aren't gonna like fall under peer pressure. So if one of them was like, oh yeah, they should be sterilized, then everyone's like, oh, I want to agree with this person because I don't want conflict. Even if they're like, oh, I don't think it's like enough to go that far.
And that's the key. That's really, the system is set up to get people with that plus sign.
Yeah.
Because they'll give it to that first person, whoever in that chain is, and they make their determination. Now, there's a point where you always run the risk, if you say no, of someone coming to talk to you from the party or from a higher authority, to just double check. Are you sure? If you say they need it, you never get that double check. So there's already this pressure from above that, hey, I might have to answer to somebody else, maybe my boss, maybe somebody from the Nazi party, I don't know, but there's a chance if I say they're fine, I get a visit. Mm-hmm. So that's going to give me a lot of pressure to put an X right there, right?
Yeah.
And as they go around this panel, those 3 people, they don't generally ever meet. Mm-hmm. The 3 people deciding your fate, they don't even talk to each other.
That's crazy. Honestly, that's pretty crazy.
And the first person makes whatever their determination is, and they hand it to the next person.
Oh, and they see the first person's determination?
Yes, they do.
That's just peer pressure.
That's exactly what it is.
And it's even more peer pressure if they only get double checked when they're like, oh no, this person's fine.
Right.
Shouldn't they get double checked either way?
Well, I mean, yes. Yes, that would be a fair thing. This isn't that though, right? And so if you're that third person and it's check mark, what are the odds you're going to say, no. These 2 experts, and they're, this medical doctor and this psychiatrist, whatever, they're all pros.
Yeah.
These 2 experts already said yes. What sort of gumption do you have to say no for someone you've probably never met? The patient you've never even seen probably. You've just got this paper in front of you.
You should see patients before something that serious.
So there's some breakdowns in kind of medical ethics.
Yeah.
But it's important to the party to have this system in place. Why?
Well,
I mean, the party definitely wants to sterilize these people
oh yeah,
for their own reasons.
because what I know about Germany, which is not a lot, because I didn't really pay attention to the history class, honestly.
Well, that's all right. We're making up ground right
But
now,
like,
Bobbijo.
what I know about Germany is they wanted this perfect world where they designed who was in it. And so my mind is like, if they see one abnormal problem, something they find is a problem, they're going to be like, no, we need to get rid of them. So that's why they want the sterilization to happen, because then they can't reproduce any more of these problems. That's what they call them. And so that's where my mind's going, like, oh, they want to get rid of this as fast as they can.
Right.
Because, like...
Right. Well, if you think of that 3 generations
Yeah.
to perfection, right? It only works if we really knuckle down.
Yeah.
Because if this first generation, it's like, so we're going through COVID right now,
Yeah.
right? If just like, 10 out of 100 people get the vaccine, then the point of vaccination is not great.
Yeah.
I mean, those 10 probably get some benefit, and some of those people maybe never were going to get it anyway. But you're never going to reach that herd immunity to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So we can apply that same logic backwards to kind of what they're thinking then. Hey, we've got to really crack down, because if we accidentally sterilize somebody who's okay, we haven't hurt the future in the same way as if we don't, and somebody with these problems sneaks through the cracks.
And like, people can also hide their problems. They can be like, they don't exist. And so they're like, honestly, if that's the case, I'm like, sterilize all of Germany. But then they're like, we can't get our perfect population if we do that. So it's like, what are you going to do if someone is like, I'm just going to hide all my problems because I want children?
Right.
So.
Right. So we've got this going on.
Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting also to me that some of these people that are getting sterilized are like early teenagers, preteens.
Oh, what?
So you might be 11 years old, and you might get picked up from your little house out in the village, run into town, get an operation. They don't even really tell you what it is. And then they, convalesce you till you're okay and send you back home.
And then when you get older, you're like,
Exactly.
You're like, why can't I have kids?
Exactly. This is part of it. And the testimonies of people who suffered this is that that's one of those things. Hey, if this happened when I was too young to know what was going on, and then later on in life, I'm trying to get married, or I'm trying to have a family and I can't, and that's just devastating.
Yeah.
Like, by then, the Nazis have run their course, the war's over, you're trying to regroup and heal as a community, as a country, and then bam, guess what? We left you a little present.
When you were 11.
Yeah, so that's
Well, and like, you can have problems when you're 11 and outgrow them by the time you're like 16.
Yeah, yes, but you never get that opportunity
Yeah.
if you make it on this list.
Oh my goodness.
Now, it's relatively easy to deal with this because there's some parents who are like volunteering their kids.
Huh?
They know their kid's kind of screwed up or their kid's struggling, so some volunteer for that. There's some who volunteer because they share this vision of, well, the future Germany. They're living collectively. Germany's in the horrible economic state after World War I. So it's bad. And if you're having to spend a lot of money on these social programs, that's hard. And some of them are looking at it in purely those terms, even though it's a familial situation.
Okay, so you're a parent, so I have to ask, would you volunteer your children for this?
No, I would not. I would not. And it's hard to imagine because the time's different. Yeah. Like in our world today, I see so much medical advancement that happens so quick that, man, your kid could have anything wrong with them. And they might figure out how to fix that. You get some nanobots up in there, right? We're on it. I don't think that was a real legitimate thought process to the Germans at the time. But again, they're not thinking, well, I just need to get through the next 10 or 12 years and then maybe there's a cure or a help. They're thinking 3 generations down the road, where are we collectively? So it's a weird world to wrap your head around. I think it's hard for us as Americans.
Mhm.
If for no other reason, then we don't, I mean, the only people in America who feel like there's an ideal American are like neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who think, I mean, Americans come from everywhere.
Yeah, we're such a diverse population.
We're this huge melting pot. We can't, go, oh, well, back in the 1200s. Well, back in the 1200s, no one was in America except natives. You can have some claim there, but
Yeah.
nobody with no white people in them
Yeah,
can say anything about that.
Native Americans are the only people who were on America. Everyone else came from somewhere. Like, I'm from Germany, Sweden, and like a Indian tribe somewhere. So I come from like so many places, and so does like everyone in America.
But you have German culture that can trace its roots back thousands of years there. So that's a little different than we can do. And I guess that's one of the reasons they were able to look so far ahead, is because they were able to look at this great deal of history behind them.
Yeah.
But we're grabbing kids off the street almost. I mean, not exactly.
Yeah.
And parents are often not that mad at it. And I think a big reason why is the science, right? It's not the Nazi party. It's not the politician coming to your door and saying, hey, we need your kid. We're going to make it so you can't be a grandma. That's not what's happening. It's a doctor, and it's probably a sheet with 3 doctors signed off saying, hey, the best treatment for your kid is going to be this sterilization.
That doesn't treat the problem, it just prevents it from continuing.
Correct. But it has that authority behind it.
Yeah.
Not politically. I mean, the Nazis could have been voted out the next election. They weren't, and too bad for history.
Yeah.
But medicine, science, they're right there saying, hey, this is what's best based on our state-of-the-art learning. And there is a big reverence for scientific tradition in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So that carried a lot of weight. And a lot of people went along.
Yeah.
This didn't always happen with notification. Okay, if you're going to grab somebody's 11-year-old kid, you're probably going to have to tell them something.
Yeah.
But a big majority of people are already in asylums, for lack of a better term. They're in some kind of facility. They're there for one of these things, and they would get checked off, have the operation become sterilized, go right back to the asylum.
But if
nobody knows.
If they're in the asylum, it's not like they're going to have kids there, so what's the point?
So yeah, because it wasn't super common for someone inside to get outside. You did just like you do now, right? Like if you have a place where people are, sometimes some of those people end up impregnated because bad things happen.
Yeah.
That was the same back then. And rather, I don't know, that's pretty grotesque that the thought process, well, we can prevent that by sterilizing people, not maybe we should stop the staff from raping people.
Yeah.
Like that might be another way to go about it. And, I wonder, this is not part of German tradition, but if you know everybody in a given institution is sterilized and you're a predator, it's open season.
Yeah.
You're not going to get caught. Nobody's going to get pregnant. It's not like they got surveillance in the way they do now, so that's pretty gross.
Well, in like asylums, they're like, oh, they're all crazy. So let's say like one of the people who got raped came forward and was like, hey, this happened.
Well, sure, they're crazy.
They're going to be like, they're crazy. They're making it up.
Right. So it kind of makes that already structurally. The people who don't have these problems, we need them getting after it because we need more people in Germany.
So they're sterilizing a good majority of the population, and then the rest of the population, they're like, come on, you need to have like 8 kids.
Exactly. And it's not a huge segment of the population they're sterilizing.
Yeah.
But over the course of the whole program, we're talking about the people who aren't crazy people.
That's a lot.
And these are not people from other countries. Like when they start killing Jews, they're importing them, right?
Yeah.
These are basically 400,000 German citizens that are never going to have a kid. And some of them might not have anyway. But man, you got to think a lot of them would have, especially these ones that are sterilizing at 12 years old.
Yeah.
How do you know? How do you know, right?
Because at 12, a lot of people aren't like thinking about that.
Right.
They're just like, oh yeah, I kind of want a future, but not really planning it.
Right.
It's as you get older that you're like, oh, where do I want to go to college? Do I ever want to have kids? And
So you're basing your society on we need to stop the reproduction of things we don't want. And we really need to increase the reproduction of the things we do want. And that's because if you're going to be a powerful nation, you need a population.
Yeah.
I can't dominate the world, let alone Europe, if I'm a little tiny country.
Yeah.
And Germany wasn't tiny, but I mean, Russia is huge. And Germany's not thinking about France or Belgium or Italy or Spain. They're thinking about Europe. So they're comparatively small against that whole block of nations.
Yeah.
And so they really want to get that population going. Plus, these are going to be the smartest, the brightest, the healthiest, while other countries are stuck with their cripples and with their deaf people and with their crazies. Germany's not going to have any, so that's going to be easier to dominate.
Well, that's the thing, because even if you get like all these perfect children, they could still have accidents and develop those problems.
Right.
So like you can get into a car wreck and become deaf.
Right.
Or you can like, I don't know, something happens to your eyes and become blind. And so they really can't define saying they're gonna just have this healthy population because accidents still happen.
Right. But we're trying to build a population.
Yeah.
Which means, and we want it done in a certain way. So we're very, I mean, the Nazis are very family friendly in that regard, right? Hey, pro-family.
Yeah.
Let's go. We want 32 of those little toe-headed, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan-blooded. Let's get it. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So if you're going to promote that kind of big family, what are you going to have to discourage? What stands in the way? Okay, the crazy people we've dealt with. What stands in the way of people having these big families?
Age. Because you can't, like, women, their clock is
Oh, well, if they're
very,
50,
like,
we're not, I know you can't have any more
Yeah.
kids. So that's
But,
a
like,
given.
There's also diseases out there that cause
Okay.
people not to have kids.
Okay, and this is a big one.
Yeah.
So syphilis causes sterilization if you let it go untreated long enough.
Yeah.
So there's a huge anti-syphilis campaign because, man, we're sterilizing the wrong people. Although they got syphilis somehow, probably not from being the most upstanding citizens, but whatever. We're trying to stamp that out.
Yeah.
We're also trying to stamp out things like abortion.
Oh.
You can't have a big family if you're out there aborting babies before they're born.
And like birth control and contraception.
And so that's an easy sell because Germany is predominantly Catholic and Lutheran. I mean, Martin Luther's German.
Yeah.
So, and both of those are very kind of anti-abortion societies. So that plays right in to some societal norms, some religious norms. That's an easy sell.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we don't want to have these things in the way. Let's just have the big families. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that takes a big hit, which also falls into this kind of religious societal belief, is you do not want to be a homosexual. Because you're not having kids if you're homosexual.
You're not.
So that means you're not helping the end result there. And later on, you know, there'll be homosexuals that end up in the camps and end up getting killed.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, the big sin with homosexuality is that, well, you can't produce offspring. So it's very much frowned upon. And as we've got things going through the legal system to have these forced sterilizations, there's laws going up at the same time to make abortion less and less possible for people and to make more strictly enforcing anti-homosexuality laws so that we can just focus on this making our little Aryan baby society.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's a perfect world.
But also, if you're like in a financial spot, you can't like support like 8 kids.
Right.
So how are they helping with that?
Right. So, but what's the trade-off? You have these healthy kids that are going to be a productive member of society, and they need some help to feed and clothe and school them. But we've got all these kids that we were gonna have that weren't gonna be that because they had these diseases or whatever. We're taking them off the books. If you look at this just financially, take all moral humanity out of it. We're taking away money from these people who weren't really gonna be that helpful and giving it to these that we think will be.
Oh.
If it's just a ledger book, and it's not, these are people,
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah.
We'll just move this pile over to here. Now, we're not spending more.
Yeah.
We're just spending it on people where we're gonna get a return on investment. That would be the financial terms. We're gonna get a return on investment here, whereas it was dead money over there.
Yeah, okay. That makes more sense. I was just, thinking, dang, if you were in a financial crisis, how are you gonna have a lot of kids?
Now, where this gets uglier to me is this kind of thinking about the human transaction and financial terms. This starts showing up in schools. If I need to teach you basic arithmetic, or if I need to teach you multiplication, I can teach you with examples like this. Hey, Joe's Bob lives in this, well, it probably wouldn't be Joe Bob. What's a good German name? I don't know. Klaus lives in this asylum, doesn't produce any money, and it cost us 10,000 Reichsmarks a year to provide for him. If we didn't have to pay for that, how many school books could we buy at 5 Reichsmarks a piece?
Oh my goodness.
So what's the implication if you're teaching little children that kind of a word problem? And this is where the pervasiveness of Nazi ideology was, it was top shelf. They went bigger and deeper and further than anybody. Because we're going to start in preschool or kindergarten. I guess they're German. We'll go with kindergarten, yes. So in kindergarten, we're going to start teaching them math about moral trade-offs. We're going to teach them 25 when it took a wheelbarrow full of money to buy English lessons. Yeah, you had freedom. About you're eugenics.
Yeah.
Like you're your own person. You can make your choices, but you can't feed your family. Well, you're going to be your country's a laughing state, and the rest of Europe's to have a certain thinks you're a joke. It's going to be supported by the church, not directly, but hey, anti-abortion, anti-homosexual. That fits right in with what the church is teaching. And also this idea of we're going to sacrifice right now for some greater benefit later. The next thing, does that happen in Christianity? I want to talk to you about this to kind of bridge this gap. I'm going to deny myself this now. What's the next reward or this reward in heaven?
Oh yeah.
So that's totally Christian thinking.
Yeah.
And now we just change the variables and make it, and we've stopped the Third Reich, the German future, messed up from having instead of more God in heaven, it's the people, the Volk, and the future.
I would think.
And it fits. It really fits that mold well. It's a subtle change, but it makes a huge difference in how you're going to
They're
think
still
about
out and about in the community.
Okay.
So if they have siblings who weren't messed up
Hitler
and could produce, they would
actually
believes
believes in this 1,000-year thing. He knows he's not going to be there for 1,000 years. I think one of the things that the bigger issue is the people that is most sterilized, and they're in those institutions. About when people talk about the Nazis, one, they blame every goofy idea on Hitler. As though he was the one guy who could come up with all this stuff. He grew up in all this stuff. Yeah. He just picked and chose from a smorgasbord of bad science and bad ideas and bad philosophies, and it was a really good spokesman for community. He's just the guy I can wrap my head around everything. But also, he was not thinking solely of I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse. Okay, he's not just a narcissist. He might as well have been. Figure out I'm he does care an awful lot about him. We are in a bad spot. But he honestly is trying to make these changes the best thing for them that will affect the next 100, the next 1,000 years. He ain't gonna be there. But what's gonna come next is that when you're teaching a kindergarten who's already been sterilized or maybe not, about these philosophies, they're a bill. That's not because you want them to vote for you in 20 years, right? You're looking, man, I'm the same medical bureaucracy that decided who's. But if I want this belief system to carry forward, if I really want for how we're going to make Germany the best community, I need to be in charge, be the authority, and who lives and dies. I think people miss. And again, we're not talking about people outside of Germany. Wasn't talking about a 1,000-year reign. Our own borders. in any kind of personal terms.
And we're gonna cross
He was
that
talking
step
about
between
lighting this fire, starting
sterilizing
setting
people
the
yet to
ground
be
work,
born,
and he honestly
and now
thought
we
it
need
would
to
carry forward
actively
after.
get rid of some of these people who are
And be this
Yikes.
ever-moving, growing movement that would just
And
become what
there's
Germany was. A lot of those. So he's a true believer,
And
not
the
just a nut
experimentation
job that
Well,
happens
that's
to make
kind of
that
how the U.S.
efficient
was. Someone
is what's going to lead
multiple
directly
people
to the gas
built
chambers
a
and
foundation
Jews
for how they wanted
and
the
the
U.S.
cannons.
to be. And
The
we were
lessons
taught this all of
learned
our lives,
in
and it's been
Germany
carrying
on their
on.
own,
Right.
older
for
people,
however long.
disabled
Right.
people,
No,
crazy
so I agree
people,
with that
Yeah.
to the
and
point.
Jews who live within Germany, and all
thankfully,
of those undesirable.
some of those guys were teaching
That's
things
gonna
about,
be,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
freedom and
upscale.
independence. Now,
These
some of
things
those
are
guys
being
are also
used.
inadvertently teaching lessons about slavery and
Oh yeah. 'Cause
some
it's
racial
crazy.
inequality, so that's
well, if you're gonna
unfortunate.
make a change, where are you gonna start at?
But the lessons they
You gotta
try
start
to
at home,
teach and
right?
they actually,
Like, if I wanna
put
change my
words in
world,
were more about
I'm probably gonna
freedom,
start with
independence, and
myself.
things we generally think
I'm
of
gonna
as
start with my
good.
family.
If
Try
you're
and
German,
get the block
I guess
on
you would
board.
sacrifice
Maybe the city,
freedom
you know,
and
it gets
independence because
bigger.
you had that.
Yeah.
And Germany wanted to purify. They started with themselves and built that the way they did.
And thought all the other countries would follow suit.
They didn't need the other countries to follow because they provide all the tools for them. But they do think when we go to France and start collecting their Jews, we're doing them a favor. I mean, yeah, France is still gonna, you know, we're gonna dominate them. But, you know, it's not like we hate them. They're just not cool as us.
Yeah.
But they're gonna thank us for removing their Jews, for removing their cripples, for removing their whatever.
Yeah.
They're really doing the world a favor in the way they see it. And it's going to be hard for the German psyche after the war. You can't just say everything was the Nazis, the Nazis, the Nazis, because it began so much more organically. The Nazis were just kind of a torchbearer for a lot of these ideas. You know, it was all hypothetical.
Yeah.
We did all these hypos, and they just said, oh, let's try it and see what really happens. And the rest, as they say, is history. So, final thoughts or questions? What do you got, Bobbijo?
Oh, sterilization, that topic is just such a controversial one too, because some people actually believe in it, and other people are like, this is crazy. And honestly, I'm one of those people who think it's crazy. Because if someone has issues, it should just be treated, not something that you put against their own will, especially if they have it as a kid, because they can always just grow out of it. And also, some people have like mental health issues due to what they grew up in their environment and not anything genetic.
Right.
And I think that's just wild. And like, I can also see why Germany did it. Like, I can see their mindset and their way of thinking, but I just can't believe it. It blows my mind.
Some of the experiments they're doing in Auschwitz, right up to the end,
Mhm.
the medical experiments they're doing are sterilization experiments. They're trying to figure out how to perfect that. They're using radiation, and it just leaves a grotesque mess. It doesn't work well. They're trying different surgical practices, inserting different chemicals into people, and trying to find a cheaper, faster way to sterilize people. So even when we're cleared down at the point where we're literally putting people in ovens, sterilization's still front and center of what they're doing and trying on people, because they haven't figured out how to do it efficient enough yet. So it's there at the beginning, and it'll still be there at the very end. So next time we meet, it'll probably be with Duke. And we'll talk about Action T4, when we're going to actually start euthanizing different groups of German citizens. And again, these won't be killings of outside people, they'll be German citizens. And as such, the persecution of the Jews will likewise be going up and up and up through this whole time. They've been getting persecuted as soon as the Nazis came to power. There was already a lot of segment of society who blamed them for different things. But that kind of moves in parallel. And once we've perfected these ideas of sterilization, which we never got to, and we've perfected this idea of euthanasia, you know where that's going to lead.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for this time on History from the Dark Side.